Hi, everyone, and welcome to Resource Revolution, the resource management podcast. I'm your host, Christine Robinson. On this podcast, we will discuss the real-life experiences of people in and around the world of resource management. Our guest today is Tom Quinn, CFO at Bennett Thrasher. With a career spanning public companies, private equity-backed firms, and closely held businesses, Tom is a seasoned finance leader known for being both a business builder and a problem solver. He brings sharp expertise in workforce performance, profit margins, and scaling, helping organizations navigate growth and change while staying true to their culture. Tom, it is so great to have you.
Good morning, Christine. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Yeah, I'm really excited to dive into this. You know, it's interesting. We have had a number of different guests coming from very different perspectives. This is certainly my favorite topic is resource management. That's my background. But this is the first guest that we've had from a finance perspective. So I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. My questions for you are somewhat varied, but what I'd like to start with is this idea of the business case for the true business case for making a change. So it's my understanding, right? You've led through a number of different things: growth, transformation, lots of complexity. Tell us how resource management first came to you. What was it about resource management that made you decide that this was a priority and something that you really wanted to focus on?
Sure. Happy to do that. I think it came about early in my career. I began my career in public accounting back in the days of the Big Eight. After about 5 years or so, I moved on to the private sector to pursue opportunities in leadership in industry. I've kind of been a very self-sufficient type of individual. I like to know how things work. I like to get under the hood and figure things out. I'm classically trained as a chief financial officer, everything from the controllership function to the pricing to director of financial planning, et cetera. But what really came down to is I have a very strong interest in operational reasons that drive a business and its numbers. I didn't get into accounting to just roll out debits and credits and do the financial reporting. I really wanted to understand and make a difference, understand how those numbers impacted the financials. My expertise has been in professional services. I've been in a bunch of very different disciplines, such as financial services, propane distribution services, medical services, marketing, PR, and accounting services. I have a playbook I use, everything from like a SWOT analysis, utilization, realization, resource planning, scale, growth, and time entry. I look at all those different elements as it relates to a business and kind of see how I can bring opportunities to kind of improve an organization. And I think there's just a wealth of information and opportunity in not only what gets billed to the client, which translates into profit for our firm, but also the non-billable time analysis in terms of where are people, if they're not being billed, where are they spending their time? How do we optimize that to make sure our personnel can bill out as many hours as possible? And then provide our availability to understand if we're overstaffed, meaning we've got unused capacity, or if we're understaffed and we need to actually add people. I've always looked at it from an operational perspective and a financial perspective in terms of just what goes on in the business and how I can help.
Yeah, that's a fantastic explanation. Very well said. It's interesting to hear you describe it from that perspective because one of the things that is a huge pet peeve of mine, and I venture to say for anyone in the resource management space, is this idea that resource management and everything that goes along with resource management is purely administrative. It's just, not this very strategic piece of really operating the business. And what I love about what you said is I didn't hear the word scheduling once, right? So it's interesting hearing you describe that because really what you articulated was something that does sound very strategic. Have you seen that perspective at all? Have you seen any, not even so much pushback, although I will ask you about pushback, but have you seen any sort of resistance to the idea that this should be focused on? Is that something that you've come up against at all?
In terms of scheduling itself, you mean?
Yeah, like why should you even look at utilization? Why is this important? Why, you mentioned the idea of billable time and kind of charging hours, and is that worth analyzing? I mean, I believe it is, right? But I'm curious because I know in my own career there's been this somewhat sense from individuals who have that perspective that, oh, well, that's not really strategic. We don't need to focus on that.
Mhm. Yeah, I think, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, what the rubber meets the road is how much we bill, right, out from that perspective and how we're utilizing our folks. I think the game has changed somewhat in public accounting over the last 4 to 5 years. And I think it really comes down to is there was always this ability to hold on to great talent because we lose talent to industry, you know what I mean, from that perspective. And I think the point will be is how do we obviously take a look at what we're doing and how we're doing it. And I think that the issue is there was a lot of elements of non-billable time, and we always were in a situation where we felt that we didn't have enough people to do and deliver the work. And I think we found out that now over the past 4 or 5 years, probably because of the COVID situation, we've held on to people a lot longer and we have a lot more people. Plus, we're also implementing technology initiatives that are obviously reducing that necessary need for all the people. So I think what it comes down to is it was a situation where how do we look at what people are doing, where they're spending their time, and scheduling is a key component.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And it's so fascinating as you described the trends in not just the history of the profession, but also in recent years and coming out of the pandemic have certainly fluctuated both in terms of talent demand, supply, what the employee experiences, and quite frankly, where we're losing talent, right? So I agree with you completely. I think the historical phenomenon was really that you lose that talent at a certain level. Maybe it start happening at the senior manager level and beyond to industry. Because something that I started to see was actually, yes, losing talent, but to completely different, like not even accounting, just kind of, doing something completely different. I don't know if that was, as you described, during the pandemic, maybe people started to kind of evaluate their priorities differently. But I guess the crux of what I'm saying is that some of the natural things that we would have planned for in this profession certainly got disrupted. And so that in my view has gone from everything from where people are going to when they're choosing to leave. I know that it was for many, many years, at least in my experience, this unspoken rule of not leaving during busy season. And in recent years, it seems that that is not the case. Can you comment on that at all?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think we did see that happening in terms of people would not necessarily stay through if they found an opportunity, they would leave. I do think, though, as kind of the kind of market's kind of softened a little bit from that perspective, I think we're seeing people hang on in the industry a little bit longer than we have in the past. And to be honest with you, we've not seen as many people typically leave last year in 2024 as we've had in previous years. And I think that just comes down to listen, first off and foremost, I think we're a great firm and we provide a great culture and we do good work and people enjoy that. So that's a great thing from that perspective. But I also think it really comes down to uncertainty in the marketplace. And I think people are like, I got a pretty dang good gig here. Why should I leave? Right. And if we
Yeah.
can keep continuing that momentum, that's how we retain the people we really need to retain. And we don't lose them to industry because it's difficult for us to have all these folks trained and then have to go through that retraining aspect of it. So we can show them their career path, how they can achieve, kind of move from staff level to supervisor, supervisor to manager, and manager to partner. That's what we're all about, trying to create that capability that people want to see.
It makes a lot of sense. And you said something that really resonated with me around the career path, because a lot of times the discussion around resource management, and rightfully so, is around the idea of utilization and billable time and what are we charging and what does the forecast look like, which by the way, I get and is very appropriate. That's part of running a business. But the other thing is this career development perspective, which I don't need to tell you clearly is very correlated to the employee experience, right? And how engaged people are. So I'm curious from your perspective in terms of what you've seen and how you made the case, right, for investing in resource management at Bennett Thrasher. Was that one of your considerations? And what I mean by that is you talked a bit about the talent atmosphere, right? And kind of what's going on in that environment. And you also touched upon this idea of really taking a look at what people are doing, not just from a billable perspective, but also from a non chargeable standpoint. And I'm curious, how much of a driver in your mind was that other piece of it? So, of course, there's the chargeable piece, which I think goes without saying, right? We know about that, we know why that matters. But Was that part of a consideration, kind of that non-chargeable or the career development as part of that? I'd be curious to get your thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, like I think it really came down to like our kind of thesis or our base case for technology investment at BT first started in our payments and collection side. There was a problem that we were not collecting. We got a lot of AR built up, but we weren't collecting it on time. And we found a solution out there. It was a software as a solution that gave us the capability to kind of fix something that was impacting our working capital. We just weren't collecting our AR as quickly as it needed to be. And I think what it came down to is when I made the presentation for the solution that I had found, some in the room wanted to rehire a collections person, just an actual a body to come in on board. And I pitched the case for the technology solution versus adding people. I've kind of used the adage that I think that professionals throw technology at problems and amateurs throw people at problems. And I think the case I made was let's use technology to the best ability that we can. I think you bring in a person. There's they come in with a salary basis. They come in with bonus and all the different add-on costs that relate to that. I was looking at it from the technology perspective, and I pitched it this way: the cost was going to be a lot less by using technology. Also, technology works 24/7, 365. Doesn't take vacations. It works weekends. Doesn't argue, and it gets along with everybody in the room. Right from that perspective. And I think really when you kind of take a look at that in terms of what the full loaded cost per person was versus technology, it really made sense to be able to kind of provide a capability that allowed us to be able to address some needs we had, i.e. dashboards, invoicing and payments that this solution provided with us. It also gave us some great abilities to use quick payment capabilities and automated the follow-up and reducing personal involvement. And it was much cheaper, much more efficient, and it was a game changer for us. Our DSOs went from I think in the range of like 45 to 60 days down to about 25 days. And luckily, I have a very supportive CEO and managing partner. Our management committee, which is made up of our service line leaders and our board, all greenlighted the project, and they felt it was something that we could really, make hay with. And that allowed us to implement this process that provided confidence to our firm that we could make technology investments that enabled us to work smarter, not harder, and get great returns on our investment. And that was the first initial elements. We built the capability there, and then Dayshift was our next investment that came across from a scheduling perspective. I saw this solution at a conference, and I knew that our practice was struggling with a scheduling tool that was built into our practice management software. It was clunky, it was inflexible, didn't have really good analytics, and there was poor tracking and reporting. And also, what really pained me more was we had to take some high performing senior management resources and talent off the playing field and put them on the bench as coaches and managing resources. And that's fine, you need great coaches. But at the end of the day, I'm taking great assets to deliver great resources for our clients. Now have to sit there and manage all that type of capability. And when I understood what Dayshape could bring to us, it made all the sense in the world to use software to keep track of all the important aspects of managing delivery versus relying on schedulers' minds, their spreadsheets, and bits of paper to manage our resources. And what I really loved about it was that Dayshape created these, I think they call them traits, but there was a dossier for every employee that resided in people's heads and in spreadsheets and in software. Now we could put it in a system that resided in our business that gave us no more tribal knowledge. We now actually knew what that was, and people will be promoted, people will leave. That resource sits there now. You don't have to worry about extracting that mindset out of people's minds. So it was very good for us from our perspective to help understand how the scheduling would work, how that non-billable would be impacted, and then obviously the AI enablement and scheduling suggestions capability is a game changer.
Absolutely. So you said a couple things there that were all very, very interesting. But before we even get into any of those, I don't know if you even realize, but you just gave a masterclass in how to put together a value proposition and really make a business case. Let's just reflect on that for a moment, because that is something that I would venture to say, well, I can with 100% confidence say that resource management leaders certainly have struggled with forever and sadly continue to struggle with. To be honest, I think that's great advice for really anyone in any industry. You broke that down into something that sounds very simple, right? And really is very easy to follow. So I'm curious, when you made that presentation, right? When you kind of put all this together, you explained why and really made that business case. How did that conversation go? Did you get pushback? Was there any hesitation? And and if you did, you managed to get it, right? So how did you work through that? How were you successful there?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I think, listen, change management is always a challenge, right? You want to change something. People have been doing things for years and years and years. It's an ingrained process. People, always look at, like, again, it's just easier for me to throw some more heads at it than it is to be able to make the investment and kind of strip down what needs to get done and rebuild it back the new process. And I think you have to understand what their pain points are, and having lived it and been in it and understanding what it's a challenge with, you gotta help them get across that change bridge, if you will, in the sense that, like, hey, listen, this is gonna undo all the stuff we've done. But if you can actually get them to see your vision and where you want to go with this and how this is going to really help resource management make better delivery to clients and obviously fulfill our employees' needs, I think it makes it that much easier. And listen, I think a lot of people have relied on Excel. A lot of people push back when I first initially said it. Excel's fine. We don't have the need or the time to put in new processes. And I, kind of broke it down to them as I said, I think this would be an opportunity that would be missed. And if you don't take this opportunity now to kind of revamp what you're going to be doing, you're going to continue to have the things that plague the organization. And it was mainly on our audit side. The tool just was not as efficient as it needed to be within our practice management software. And I think when we actually explained it and walked them through it and had Dayshape come in and actually explain the use of AI technology and how that was going to benefit making decisions and allow them to be much more strategic rather than tactical in terms of what they're doing, people understood it. And then when we actually looked at the cost was negligible as it relates to that. And it was going to be able to help organizations thrive. And I think that was what got them across the bridge for us.
It's fantastic. It's interesting. I mean, what I'm hearing is that you really presented it in such a way that was not only compelling but was very easy to follow, right? And I think that's part of what quite frankly I think people sometimes fall down in that way, where you approach it from a standpoint where it's, pick this, pick this, pick this, without necessarily having painted the picture, so to speak, around what this could do. And the other thing that I heard you say is when you saw the product, right? When you actually were able to kind of experience it, that I wonder if maybe that's another area where people should really be thinking about, whether that's technology or, a new vision for, I don't know, a team structure or process, is paint the picture, get the value proposition really articulated, but then actually show them, right? Like give them a idea of what this could look and feel like. So I think that's really interesting. There's something else that you said around the strategy, right? And kind of moving from the tactical to being strategic. How did that actually manifest itself? Because I imagine that it wasn't day one, right? All of a sudden you snapped your fingers and everything was working perfectly. Do you feel that through that journey and now where the process is now, that the resource management process gets that strategic attention that you were envisioning? Is it what you were hoping for?
Yeah, I mean, I tapped into the folks that kind of helped us kind of drive this through our audit process. Brittany is one of our key managers in helping delivery on this, and I asked her, like, what was the things that you really got out of it? What do you see the benefits of implementing Dayshape and how it kind of helped you from a resource management perspective? And she just came back and said efficiency, things getting done a lot easier than they had in the past. What felt like 100 steps in the past now felt like one step. And it made a huge difference in terms of what the new capability did versus the old scheduling software. It also allowed us to tie in scheduled time that creates budgets. We had huge issues previously where budgets would get approved, but then managers would overschedule just because they were using week blocks or hoarding resources. And then people would have to consistently run reports to see which jobs were overscheduled. This has helped a ton in terms of understanding where that capability is, and it makes it just so much more efficient. And now even the team resources, the people that are using the software, not the schedulers, but the actual people that are using, they can see all their information in their schedules that allows them to be able to kind of be in tune to what's happening from their own schedule, and then just having everything held in one place. Again, like I mentioned before, spreadsheets, all the different elements that kind of held all the different things, like people's location, who their guide was. We call guides kind of our people that are kind of our performance planners, if you will. what their disk profile was, what their start dates were. All those different elements are now loaded in there. And then on top of it, you add all the different key elements, their traits, like their CPA, their industry experience, what they were good at from that aspect. It was all there and gave them the capability. And I think there's just so much we just scratched the surface on, you know what I mean, from that perspective. The AI feature, which is really great, and I think we started using some of that, but with it being our first go round and with the big busy season scheduling, we're slowly implemented that and getting managers used to just requesting the levels and traits they need and letting them find those. I think as people are more comfortable with it, I've heard already that people are really looking forward to that capability to be able to say, now I can trust that AI is going to give me the solutions that I used to have to go farm for. Now it's going to provide me with solutions where I can actually make those choices and choose. So I think it's just going to be a much more efficient process, and we're excited to see what is done already, and it's going to just do so much more for us going forward.
And now a word about our sponsors, Dayshape. Do you ever feel like your team spends more time managing spreadsheets than getting actual work done? If you're a strategic leader in a professional services firm, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Say goodbye to the chaos with Dayshape. Dayshape is an AI-powered platform that takes the stress out of resource management. Imagine scheduling, planning, and staffing all being handled in one smart system that actually understands your business. Sounds too good to be true? Believe me, I dreamt of having this type of technology when I was a resource management leader. It's like having a superpower for your firm, boosting productivity, profitability, and even employee happiness. Plus, it seamlessly integrates with your existing tools, so there's zero disruption. Do you want to see the magic in action? Check out dayshape.com and see how your resource management function can be elevated to a more strategic position. Trust me, your team and your CEO will thank you. It makes a lot of sense, and one of the things that really stuck out when you described that is when you mentioned this change management process, which is a big one, right? This is a huge part of the success of rolling out anything, whether it's a tech tool, a new process, a new leader comes in, right? One of the things that I have seen is once you get the buy-in to move forward, there is this idea of what are the quick wins to continue that momentum, right? Because if it's just painful, just ask people to get on board and do this, that, and the other thing in order to get something to launch, and they're not seeing the return, that really can erode at the trust in the process. So it's interesting hearing you describe what I'd label as quick wins in terms of the efficiency. And, I love that quote, something that used to take 100 steps, now takes one. Was that an intentional thought that you had to say, we're going to deliver these 3 things, in the next week or so? Or was that just simply by virtue of having implemented something new, it was just clear that these things happened? Because it sounds like, as you're describing, through that initial positive experience, it seems that certainly would open up the opportunity for people to open up their hearts and minds to say, oh, you know what, it's got this AI capability and I'm willing to try that. Typically what I've seen, and I'm curious your perspective, human behavior typically tells us that 1, people are resistant to change. 2, if it starts changing and it just feels really hard, they're really not interested in that 3rd step anymore. So I'm curious how that played out, what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, whenever we make investments in technology, people are always afraid, like, this is too good to be true, right? Like, in terms of, like, we're going to make this, the people that are the vendor that's providing the capabilities say, hey, this is all we can do for you, right? And that's all great. And you see it on the screen, it looks fantastic. And that's pitched to you. But when you get into it and you go through the throes of the implementation process, I think we did a very super quick implementation. It was probably one of the fastest ones that they had done. And I think that we pushed that through, and it was done pretty well. It was doable. There was work on our end that needed to be done, but I think it was guided very well by Dayshape to get things squared away. And I think we had a senior software consultant on site for a good period of time that was really game changing in the sense that, like, it enabled us to kind of get up to speed quicker, use that resource to answer questions, and then train the trainer to train everybody else to kind of work that process through. And I think it really worked well. And then obviously, as they stepped through it, they really did find out that this software really could do the things that it said it could do. And I think the great part about it was just people said, I've gone through a process. It's going to be arduous in terms of anything, setting things up and breaking things down and starting over new will be, but when they were able to deliver on something they had promised, that just builds huge credibility with the people that made the decisions and also people using the software. And I think we've just found that with Dayshape in terms of us giving a capability that we didn't have exist before. And that's really what pumps people up, knowing that, hey, listen, we've invested in something that's really beneficial to people, not only the profit and bottom line for our organization, but the people that are doing the work and people that are being scheduled and the schedulers themselves. So I think it's been a great process from our perspective.
It's huge, and I think about what you're describing, and there's a few different things that come to mind based on what you're telling us here, right? Because part of it is the very positive and fantastic story that an investment was made and it was worth it, right? So that in
Mm-hmm.
itself is a win.
Yep.
The other thing though is, and I'm, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm certain you'd agree with this. There, you didn't just pick out of a hat, right, and hope for the best. There was some vetting process that went into that allowed you to make the right decision. And I don't know if that was, your own preparation. I don't know if that was gauging a sense of what was in the market. I don't know if that was kind of that self-reflection of really knowing your firm and what the problem areas are. There are countless organizations, both in the public accounting space, certainly in the advisory space. There are many industries that have some form of the billable and chargeable hour and resources that need to be deployed and the selling of their time. And so I do think that this applies much more broadly than just, one industry. And so I guess my question is, based on what you learned, how much of it was luck and how much of it was either preparation or true strategic vetting? And that being said, what should others do, right? They find themselves in this situation. I'd venture to say that many people are working within organizations where their operational process is not perfect. They know that they want to make some sort of an investment in technology. What do you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think we first looked at Dayshape. We also had heard about how a lot of the kind of the big four and the larger firms were implementing Dayshape. And we thought to ourselves, Bennett Thrasher prides itself on being fiercely independent. We want to remain independent. We don't see, at least in the near term, need to be able to get into the private equity. Private equity is kind of all over because they see the opportunities that are out there. And if we want to be fiercely independent, we need to start to be taking moves that allows us to retain our independence. And part of that is like, how do we become more efficient with the staff we have? How do we retain those type of elements? We don't have the budgets that a lot of these larger big four firms have, but there's still a capability to kind of go ahead and implement technology initiatives and capability that allows us to be able to deliver first customer service and delivery products to our clients, keep our employees fulfilled, and then obviously have the profits that go along with it. So I think the point will be is like our need to be able to use technology to advance ourselves and become more efficient is kind of a necessary evil. Otherwise, we're probably not going to be able to survive on our own. And I think we needed to kind of start to adopt some of the things that people are doing in the industry and do it ourselves versus being bolt on into an acquisition that's already done it and used their capabilities and services, or that we would be a platform for anybody. And we could potentially be a platform down the road, but it was more of our investment in terms of how do we go ahead and be able to provide a capability and use technology to become that much more efficient, more profitable from our perspective.
Would it be a stretch to say that having done this, having made this investment both in the tech and or the process that the tech now enables, that this has given Bennett Thrasher a bit of a competitive edge?
Yes, I think it does. I mean, uh, our firm believes that embracing technology investments and professional services is an absolute edge. I think it leads to pleased clients, fulfilled staff, and then just higher profits, just in general. And I think the key thing here too is like I don't think anybody goes into accounting to say, "Hey, I want to do debits and credits all day long. I want to do bank recs all day long, etc." I think the way it needs to be sold to staff is that we need to communicate to them that we are making the investment to benefit our technology that's coming into our organization, not to eliminate your jobs and sitting over you like Big Brother. It's to make you more effective. We want our staff to understand that there's a lot of important non-value added tasks that are crucial to the work we do, right? It's all everything that goes in from an audit perspective, everything from cash, bank reconciliations, cash proofs, to all the different elements that need to get through to us to deliver, opinions on their financial statements. But what we were looking to do is that work still needs to get done. We want to transition as much of that work to machine learning so that our staff become more efficient in analyzing those outputs and make you better and accelerate your ability to grow to provide the true value added resources to our clients. To me, that's where I think this industry has to go, because there is so much rote work that people don't get in and say, like, hey, I want to be a tax return specialist. The next 10 years, I got to do 3,000 tax returns a year to be able to kind of be successful and learn the business. No, you went to school to learn how to do all those type of elements. You do need to understand the rubrics and the nuts and bolts behind those, but we should be looking at better ways to analyze the outputs and be a higher value customer service delivery for our clients. That's what makes us sticky to clients. That's what people want from our perspective. They hire us as professionals to be able to provide the capability. Yeah, we got to do the rote work that sits behind the scenes, but let's allow technology to do that for us versus people.
It's huge, and I, by the way, agree completely. What comes to mind as you're describing that is there are two different, I'd say, perspectives that you'd articulated. One was the, I guess I call it the end user perspective, right? You talked about someone who had been in the tool, right, and experiencing
Mhm.
it and really being able to leverage the technology in a way that was making life a lot easier. That's fantastic, right? That's of course exactly what you'd want in a large investment that you'd made for your organization. So there's that piece. But the other one is from your perspective, right? Presumably you're not going in the tool and scheduling yourself, right? So you're in a different type of role, having held both a COO role, a CFO role, and really being at that level in the organization. What are you seeing out of the tool, right? So there's the kind of the end user, someone who's like rolling up their sleeves using it versus what you're actually gaining. Do you think that that is everything that you just described, right? Some of those major trends like employee retention and things of that nature? Or is there anything else? What matters to that executive leadership team that makes you feel like, yes, we've done this and it's worked out successfully?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, this was a challenge that I'd mentioned earlier that audit was having with the scheduling software. It was not as efficient. They got it done, but it was a lot of work that went on and a lot of duplicative effort. They're tough folks to sell to. They're auditors, right? They're typically asking the questions. What's my return on investment? Am I going to get everything out of this, et cetera? They're the hardest people, I think, that I have to internally sell into, because I'm a former auditor, so I know I think like they do, and I'm like, all right, prove it, right, from that perspective. And I think that it was proven that there was a capability for us to be much more efficient, and we've just gotten glowing reviews in terms of how the people said that the software works, how efficient it is in comparison to what we had. And I think that's a great movement. It's a great energy. And if the auditors buy in on this, I think the rest of our firm is going to probably be looking at doing this as well. I mean, we started with audit. Audit was a challenge. We knew that we had to kind of get squared away from the scheduling perspective. They're enamored with it has come about as a result of it, and I think it's only going to get better. As you mentioned, I do have a CFO and COO role in terms of to play from my perspective of my career, and I've worn both hats. Regardless of whether my title was pure COO or CFO or both, you know, when I make decisions, if I've got to make a financial decision, there's going to be consequences and impact to the operations of the business, and that's why every decision I make wears both of those hats. Because if I also need to make an operational decision, that's going to have a challenge and an effect on my financials. So when I make those decisions, it's all looking at from a perspective of like, how is this balancing? How is this helping the organization? And it's not just nuts and bolts, dollars and cents. It's how is it impacting my fulfillment of my people? Are they getting their jobs done? Do they like what they do? Are we providing them the capability to hone their skills and become better and show them the career path that's available in public accounting? And I think, if we do this right, we're going to retain a lot more of the people that we really need to retain. And I think they're going to be fulfilled and lay that in with the great culture we have. I think it's, only better days for Bennett Thrasher as we go forward.
Wow, that's fantastic. Very, very actually a powerful statement, right? Because it's actually reflective right now of a, I'd say, pretty disruptive time in the profession, right? With everything that's happening, both in terms of talent and some of the financial investments that are happening at a grander scale and M&A activity happening. So it's really, it depends how you look at it, right? But it's a very exciting time as well, and I love how you just summarized that. So I don't know that I have any other questions on that. I think you summarized that really well. But before we let you go, I do need to get into our rapid fire questions. So every guest has the same final two questions this season. I'll start with the first one. So Tom, what is the best piece of career advice that you have ever received?
Hmm. Um, I probably have to say that mentors over the years that advised me as I was integrating into leadership, that you'll lead better, you'll improve morale, and you improve your organization by doing this one thing regularly. And it's the initials are MBWA. It's called management by walking around. And it's engaging directly with employees, observing the work they do and the processes that they use, fostering internal, informal communications, and asking questions. But more importantly than anything else is listening. That whole process of just walking around. I do walk around the business a lot and get out on the shop floor. And this is regardless of whether you're in professional services or a manufacturing business. Walking around the floor and touching base with the people that are on the front lines. I've always been told by my mentors that there's more insights and opportunity and even knowledge that sits out there than it does in the C-suite and that you'll ever get from sitting and poring over spreadsheets and data. And it really truly is. Because for all intents and purposes, being aware of the resource management and scheduling problem that I heard about from an auditing perspective led to the discovery of how Dayshape could help fix our situation. Right? At the end of the day, there was a need out there. If I had never known about that, I think I ran across Dayshape in a conference that they told us what they could do. I'm like, oh, that sounds pretty interesting. It's good. I don't think our software is as capable as it was. But if I had not walked around and spoke to people and understood what was really paining them, there was no opportunity for me to link the two to kind of fix something from that perspective. So to me, I think that's a great piece of advice that I've used and I continue to do. Get out of your office, get out talking with people and understand what they're up against. It also builds teamwork, fosters trust and openness, and you're giving the employees a voice. They really feel that you're heard. From that perspective, leaders become more approachable and they understand there's a trust bridge that's built. And I think that that's extremely important for any organization to be successful, that we're using our people to help us, plot forward what our future is. And I think that's key.
It's huge. It's huge. And I love the way you described the sort of dual benefit of that, right? Because it helps leadership, but it also certainly reinforces the employee culture and engagement. So I think that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Question number two. Would you be willing to share a mistake that you made at some point in your career and what it taught you?
Ooh, we don't have enough time in the podcast to go through all the mistakes I've made. But I will tell you the truth. I don't know if this is more of a mistake as a rookie or an awareness.
Sure.
I think probably when I was younger, I was not as open to finding the better way. It was like you come out of school, you're trained classically. Hey, this is what needs to get done. Here's the rules to be followed from that perspective. You know, it was just simpler to just perform the work using the processes in place versus investing the time to fix the process. It's just like, wow, this is going to take me, X amount of time. But for me to break this down and put some new things to kind of get the process fixed, it's just easier for me and more efficient for me to just be able to kind of just do the job. So I had to learn to be able to kind of accept there's ways, and you need to make an investment. You need to understand, listen, if you're going to, come up with a solution that you think is going to fix and make the process more efficient for everybody, you need to embrace it. And then you need to learn how to be able to manage change for everybody else. It really comes down to a situation where I needed to learn how to go ahead and address situations as I came into leadership roles, that I needed to kind of articulate, here's the need, here's what I think needs to get done. embrace it, and then help others navigate their way across that bridge of change. I think I've talked about it before. And you got to get people to understand what your vision is. And when you can get them to be open to it, to believe in it, it just makes it that much easier from that perspective. So I think it was probably something I didn't do great early in my career, but then as I've gotten more experienced and I've grown in what I do, I think I've been much more capable to be able to make that case to people and help lead them to kind of change that's going to really make their lives and fulfillment at their job better.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's so true what they say, right? That you have to experience these different things and you really do learn from them. And I see the, I guess I would say, after effect of that in absolutely everything that you described, whether it's change management or getting people on board or sort of holding their hand through the process. So I appreciate that perspective. I think it's so, so true. And it really, at least from what I'm hearing, really seems to come through in your current leadership style. So really appreciate you sharing that. Tom, it has been awesome talking with you. Thank you very much for sharing your story with us. And with that, we will wrap up our conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, help others discover our show. So follow, like, or subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time on Resource Revolution.